Alrighty, so the Denver Broncos are surprisingly 0-3 by the start of the year, and the game we just saw last Sunday was absolutely putrid. Putrid performance by the Denver defense, and Miami scored the second most total points in a game in NFL history. And the fact that the great Sean Payton, a guy that was seen as the savior for this struggling team, a guy that was supposed to turn this team around from the season before, somehow, in some way, ended up in the history book in the worst possible way. Russell Wilson didn't really make that much improvement so far, especially with Sean Payton on the helm. Defense looks heinous. I mean, there's a whole lot of shit I need to talk about in this video. So here it is, guys. Are the Denver Broncos on track to have another losing season? That's what we're going to discuss in this video. Amen, say man, this is the A-Man Show, back at it again for more content. Make sure y'all subscribe. I post NBA and NFL content, turn on post notifications so that way y'all stay tuned for more content I put out. Anyways, stay tuned and let's get the video started. The Denver Broncos during the offseason traded for Sean Payton from the Saints in exchange for a first-round pick of this year's draft, in which they drafted Bryan Bresee with the 29th overall pick, along with next year's second-round pick. It's still early in the season to judge whether this is a terrible move, but as it looks right now, this trade is not panning out like it should for the Broncos, especially being 0-3 by the start of this year. And Bryan Bresee is making an immediate impact for the Saints defense, along with a viable second-rounder for next year. So since Denver made the move to trade for Sean Payton, they also hired their former head coach in Vance Joseph as the coordinator. Going into the season, the Denver Broncos were expected to be a playoff contender, now having Payton there to help fix Russell Wilson's issues as a player. This, along with a beefed up O-line, a competent receiving and running back core, and a top 10 defense, I was expecting the Broncos to be undefeated through week 3, but that can be further from the truth. The Denver Broncos look absolutely atrocious. First game was a tough loss. Raiders pulled through by a stinger, but still Russ did not play the greatest as far as throwing the football, but it's the first game of the season, so whatever. But in the second game, that's when we need to have some concern, because against Washington, the Broncos were up 18 points in the first half. Russell Wilson was playing like his Seattle self, but in the second half, the Broncos went from playing like one of the best teams in the league to one of the worst. Russell Wilson just can't even try to get the offense going, having constant 3-and-outs, and also the defense was downright heinous. They can't seem to stop the run, especially guys like Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, and their secondary was getting absolutely cooked out there, Justin Simmons and Pat Surtain included. Broncos O-line looked fucking shit, allowing so many pressures and sacks, and you think it couldn't get even worse. Well, think again, guys, because this fucking game speaks for itself. Just watch.
Field goal and break the all-time record if they'd like. That'll do it. You're going to see the handshake between the coaches here.
The Dolphins put up Madden numbers on Sunday. Hell, if I were the Dolphins, I wouldn't put this type of punishment on my worst enemy. They're the first team to have a QB throw for over 300 yards, a running back that rushed for over 200 yards, and a receiver that recorded over 150 yards. All because of this Broncos heinous defense. This is by far the worst performance in Broncos franchise history. We all know how hard it is to score in the NFL as compared to the collegiate and high school level. But if you're in the NFL and a team put up 70 on your head, then that right there should be the only reason why this franchise needs to be disbanded, or should be a new franchise edition of the USFL. I'm kidding. But if I'm being real with myself, I wouldn't be surprised if there are significant changes in the roster and coaching staff. In fact, I would not be surprised if Vance Joseph gets let go after 3 games because of how awful he is at coordinating this defense. The defense now holds the record for the most total yards given up in a game in NFL history. And also the way that he constructs his defense, being this uber aggressive heavy blitz team that doesn't adjust, and teams taking great advantage of this, goes to show you how bad Vance Joseph is as DC. Although there's other areas to mention as far as their lack of secondary depth and other issues regarding their shitty tackling, shitty covering, all due to the lack of talent on the roster. And also, Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons needs to step up, because in the last 2 games they played was just unacceptable, putrid performances by the both of them. But anyways, The majority of the blame goes towards Vance Joseph, and looking at the offense is nothing but shitty. Russell Wilson continues to prove to us that he is no longer the guy in Seattle, even though statistically he has taken a step forward. But when you actually watch the games, the guy's production is not leading to wins whatsoever. And also the guy has a constant habit of playing worse in the second half of each game. Washington, for example, and also last season. Just to remind you that he signed a 5-year, $245 million deal 2 off seasons ago. And with that being said, I don't see Payton considering benching Russell Wilson because his play so far is not terrible, but it's not good enough. And the other QBs behind him are not going to do a better job than Russ. And in actuality, Sean Payton should get the boatload of the blame on the offense due to the lack of clock management, and also the play calling has been really questionable at times. He needs to do a better job with clock management, running the ball more often, and also implement Marvin Mims more on offense. That loss against the Dolphins should really be concerning whether or not this team should tank, because the roster, especially the way they've played last Sunday, don't look like it can compete for a wildcard spot. And by the way, the Dolphins didn't have Jalen Ramsey nor Jalen Waddle playing in that game. If I were the Broncos, I would do whatever I can to try to make trades to get some key pieces on the roster to try and get a wildcard spot and fire some coaches. But after that game, this team is simply not good enough to compete for a Super Bowl. And better yet, a deep playoff run is out the fucking window. But like I said, it's only 3 games, 15 games more to go. There's still time for them to make a turnaround, but so far they have been arguably the worst team in all of football. I would not be surprised if they tank this year and rebuild, especially if they lose against the Bears. Justin Fields somehow, in some way, have a field day against this Broncos defense, then the Broncos should consider tanking, because no way in hell will the Broncos make the playoffs if they lose to Chicago. So the Denver Broncos are in a situation where they're the most laughed at team in the NFL. They're a team that has both a shit offense and even more shittier defense. And the way it's looking right now, they are on a trajectory of a 4-13 season if they don't make adjustments towards this team, especially Sean Payton not making adjustments. Then this move would have been all for nothing. But still, 15 games left to go. They do have a relatively easy schedule, so a turnaround can be a possibility, but we have to wait and see. And that's the video. Let me know in the comment section below about the Denver Broncos and how they can go about this season. And also, make sure y'all subscribe for more content I put out. Road to 1,000K subs. Turn on post notifications, and that is all. Stay litty. This is the A-Man Show. Sign out.